Well, can you imagine if some of our biggest football stars, like, say, Wayne Rooney or David Beckham, were called up to the army to fight overseas?
What an interesting thought. I must say, if I were the enemy, I think I'd be terrified to be confronted by Wayne Rooney in particular.
They'd probably be able to run them out, wouldn't they?
Anyway, there's a serious point to your question, because that's exactly what happened during the Great War between 1914 and 1918, and many of them, of course, died. Now, nearly 100 years later, players from the youth team at Notts County have travelled to France to retrace the footsteps of those fallen heroes. Our reporter Michael Sibbert went with them.
Notts County's youth team aren't the first group of young footballers to travel to the battlefields in northern France. They're following in the footsteps of the footballers' battalion from the Great War. Along the way, they'll visit the memorial to those who died and learn about some of football's biggest names who fought for their country. The 17th Middlesex Regiment, the first of the footballers' battalions, was set up by MP William Hicks in December 1914. Nearly every other sport had suspended their leagues at the outbreak of war, but the Football Association had continued with the 2014-15 season.
Well, there was a lot of criticism that people were enjoying themselves playing football while thousands were dying in the trenches in Flanders. So the football authorities curtailed the Football League programme. Football was played on a regional basis, but the professional game went into abeyance for the rest of the war.
This is footage of Leyton Orient playing Leicester City in the final game of that season. At the end of the match, the London side changed into their khaki uniforms and marched with the 17th Middlesex.
It wasn't just footballers that joined the Footballers Battalion. Fans joined to fight alongside their heroes. And when they got to here at Delville Wood on the 17th of July 1916, they died next to their heroes and are still buried next to them today.
Delville Wood is where the battalion first saw action in the Battle of the Somme. By the end of July, 36 men had died and a further 200 were injured. Today, it's an eerie place, especially at night.
The size of the place brings it home just how many people lost their lives, and I say in the day it's a harrowing place in the day, but at night it's just that bit worse.
One of the men injured at Delville Wood was England international Major Frank Buckley. He was the first man to sign up to the Footballers Battalion. He survived the war and went on to manage Wolverhampton Wanderers for 17 years between 1927 and 1944. He's credited with being the first of the modern managers.
They all had to call him the Major. And he was very strict, but he looked after them. He said, there's nothing better when I walk in the dressing rooms in the mornings and I can hear the youngsters singing, doing their jobs, like cleaning the baths, cleaning the boots, but he looked after them, but he was strict, very strict.
Some weren't lucky enough to have a career after 1918. Of those who died, some were the most high-profile sportsmen of the day. Walter Tull was the second black footballer to play in Britain. One of his clubs was Northampton Town. During the war, he became the first black officer in the British Army, despite rules against it.
Walter Tull was actually killed in the Battle of Arras. He's no known grave. One of his colleagues was a goalkeeper from Leicester. When Walter was wounded, he went out into no man's land, tried to bring him back, but couldn't. And his body's never been found.
The story of the Footballers Battalion is the very essence of the Great War. Of the 4,500 men who joined the 17th Middlesex Regiment, it's thought around 900 lost their lives, with many more injured. Regardless of levels of fame, earnings or profile, footballers, fans and staff fought and died shoulder to shoulder. Tomorrow, more on the Footballers Battalion memorial that stands at Delville Wood and the man behind it. Michael Sibbert in Albert in France for Central Tonight.
Fascinating stories.
Well, I've learned something.
I certainly have learned something. Wow. And you can see a little bit more of that amazing archive of Leicester City playing Leyton Orient in 1915. It's on our website at itv.com/central. Of course, back then, Leicester City were called Leicester Fosse and Leyton Orient were called Clapton Orient.
I've learnt some more.
More, there you go.
keep viewing. Right, the national and international news is just a few moments away, so let's